Revealed: 5 incredible foods that transform your sleep and lower cortisol. Fast after 70. Helen sat on her porch, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. The laughter of her grandchildren echoed from the backyard, a melody she longed to join but felt so distant from. Insomnia had become an unwelcome companion, stealing the night hours and her ability to connect. Every smile felt forced as she listened to their tales of school projects and friendships, her heart aching with the fear that she was fading from their world. She had devoted her life to others as a nurse, yet now the very essence of who she was seemed trapped in a fog of exhaustion and anxiety. The shadows of her sleepless nights crept back into her mind, as relentless as the tick of the clock on the wall. Helen desperately wanted to feel like the strong matriarch they remembered, but exhaustion gnawed at her, rendering her a spectator in her own life. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and deep blue, her old friend Charlie joined her. He had always had a way of seeing the bright side, a twinkle in his eye even in the twilight of his own life. "You know, Helen," he began, "I've been reading about 5 incredible foods. They can help promote sleep and lower cortisol levels. You could try them." A flicker of hope ignited within her. "Really? You think so?" she asked, skepticism lacing her voice as memories of gentle nights flooded back. The notion of nutmeg-laced oatmeal or ginger-infused soups danced like a dream. But could they really alter her reality? "Absolutely," Charlie said, enthusiasm filling his tone. "But it's more than just food. It's about nourishing your soul too. You come from a lineage of strong women. Remember your grandmother's slow-cooked stew?" Each word pulled her deeper into a bitter-sweet nostalgia, beckoning her to consider the change. And then emerged the first dilemma. Was she ready to embrace this path? Could she break free from the comfortable yet destructive cadence of late-night ice cream and sugary snacks that lulled her into a momentary retreat? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But with each culinary temptation that whispered her name late at night, a battle of wills erupted. She considered opening the ice cream carton, the creamy comfort that soothed her fretful mind, but thought of the fervor with which Charlie spoke about nurturing her insides. Did she really want to remain trapped in this cycle of guilt and despair? But just as clarity began to appear, a startling recollection pinched at her heart. The stew. It held a recipe passed down through generations, a secret ingredient crafted with love that had slipped into the abyss of her memory. Wasn't this the bridge to her essence? As she stirred the pot of slow-cooked broth, each swirl resonated with voices from the past. The stew wasn't merely food, it was a connection to her history, to a legacy she feared she had almost forgotten. The tension twisted within her as she realized that nourishing herself was an act of remembrance, a step away from the stereotypes that had been laid upon her with every wrinkle and gray hair. Would this revelation empower her, or simply deepen the shadows? The doorbell rang, a bold chime slicing through her thoughts. Her grandchildren stood there with their bright eyes sparkling with myriad ideas, inviting her to dive into their world once more. Helen hesitated, her heart pounding in her ears, not from joy, but from the dread that haunted her of once again failing to fully engage. Could she muster the strength, the vigor to join them? The weight of her struggle felt heavier than she imagined, as hope and fear danced in her mind. Would she choose them, to reclaim the connection, or let doubt anchor her anew? The answer evaded her grasp, yet the longing for that connection pressed fiercely on her heart, intensifying with each passing moment. Helen stood at the threshold, her mind racing. The joy radiating from her grandchildren seemed palpable, yet it was overshadowed by an invisible barrier of self-doubt. She could hear the soft chatter of their voices, a comforting hum that beckoned her to step forward, to share in their boundless energy and laughter. But deep inside, a whisper of anxiety held her back, urging her to retreat into the safety of solitude. Glimpses of the past flooded her memory, days spent not just as their grandmother, but as a vibrant soul bursting with life. Those moments felt like mere echoes now, and she yearned to reclaim that part of herself. Could the warmth of the stew she had just started truly provide the gateway back to that version of her? She took a deep breath and stepped out onto the porch, the evening air cool against her skin. "Come on, Grandma!" one of them called, their excitement sparking a flicker of determination within her. As she walked towards them, a tension uncoiled slowly. Each step felt less burdensome than the last. The garden was alive with their laughter, reminding her that connection could still be found if she allowed herself to be vulnerable. "What's the plan today?" she asked, forcing a smile though it trembled slightly on her lips. To her surprise, her grandchildren began to spill out ideas with wild enthusiasm. They wanted to build a fort out of blankets, stage a play, and even attempt a cooking competition using what they could scavenge from her kitchen. Each suggestion infused a thrill of excitement in her heart. As they grouped together, Helen slipped away to join them in the chaos of creativity. She could feel the walls encasing her heart start to chip away, inch by slow inch. As they pulled out sheets and pillows, Helen found herself drawing on the resources of her past. "You know, I used to do something like this with my friends when I was your age," she began, her voice steadier as she shared stories of her childhood. The children listened, eyes wide with wonder, and for the first time in what felt like ages, she was more than just a witness. She was a participant, an active character in this play of life. Hours passed effortlessly. The fort took shape, adorned with bright cushions and twinkling fairy lights. When laughter erupted around her, Helen felt the shadows dissipate, giving way to warmth and light. It was like regaining part of her identity, not just as their grandmother, but as Helen, someone who loved creating memories. With every giggle shared, a small piece of her anxiety faded, as if laughter itself served as an antidote. As night descended, she led them to the kitchen, ready to try their hand at cooking. The notion of bringing Charlie's advice into action flickered in her mind as she gathered fresh vegetables from the fridge. "Let's make my grandmother's special stew together," she suggested, the thought igniting enthusiasm amongst the younger ones. Chopping, stirring, and mixing, the once alien ingredients began to feel familiar again. But beneath the surface of shared exclamations and children's chatter, Helen grappled with an emerging thought. Was she simply rediscovering herself in the kitchen, or was she also breaking free from the expectations she had imposed upon herself? For the first time in months, she felt uplifted, her heart buoyed by connection. Yet, even in this joy, a small kernel of fear lurked. What if this newfound energy faded once the pots cooled, once the laughter quieted? Would the darkness slip back in, as it had countless times before? As the stew simmered, filling the air with a soothing aroma, she took a moment to reflect amidst the bustling chaos of her grandchildren. The warmth from the pot mirrored her rekindling spirit. But there it was, the niggling doubt that would accompany her on this journey. What other fears lay buried beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed as she dared to embrace her authentic self fully? The thought lingered as they sat down to enjoy the meal together. A meal that was more than nourishment. It was a tapestry woven with her past, present, and the hopeful threads of future connections. Still, a question hung above the table, unvoiced but palpable. What awaited her beyond this moment of joy, beyond the stew simmering on the stove? As mental shifts surged within her, Helen felt the embers of determination ignite, ready to confront whatever uncertainties lay ahead. Little did she know, the decision to embrace vulnerability and connection was only the beginning. The journey into her past, steeped in the wisdom of generations, was preparing to unveil even greater revelations of self-discovery. The time had come to face what she had suppressed for too long. The laughter of her grandchildren filled the air like sweet music, wrapping around Helen like a warm blanket. Eating together brought a sense of normalcy back into her life, but the taste of her grandmother's stew carried an unspoken burden. It was familiar, yet hauntingly distant, causing her to reflect on the tumultuous years past. Each bite made her question her own choices, her lost dreams, and the person she had chosen to become. As the meal progressed, Helen felt feelings of nostalgia wash over her, weighed down by a heavy sense of regret. Her grandchildren, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her, continued to chatter eagerly, sharing stories and whispers of their daily happenings. It was difficult for her to maintain the facade of perfect grandmotherly joy, when inside she felt the echoes of what could have been threatening to drown her. After the dishes were cleared, Helen's exuberance waned. She found herself retreating to the living room, away from the playful chaos, letting her grandchildren continue without her. On the couch, she scrolled through her phone mindlessly, searching for tiny morsels of distraction as if that would chase away looming shadows. Yet, her mind flitted back to Charlie's succinct advice. Find your spark again, Helen. Reconnect with what you love. His words rang louder in the quiet. She paused, contemplating a deep-rooted question that swirled within her consciousness. What was it that she loved? Was it cooking, gardening, or perhaps the art of storytelling? Instinctively, she felt more than that. It was about creating connections, leaving her imprint on the world, something that had begun to feel foreign, buried under complacency. Her gaze fell on a shelf where old photo albums collected dust, memories entombed within faded pages. With a sudden resolve, she stood, brushing off her layers of self-doubt like cobwebs. Perhaps diving into those snapshots would spark something dormant within her. Opening the first album, she flipped through photographs of laughter-filled holidays, family vacations, and joyful gatherings. Yet with each turn of the page, a gnawing sense of loss clawed at her heart. Each face reflected not simply memories, but dreams she had set aside, the vibrant woman she had become merely a specter behind the lens. As she lingered on a picture from her youth, wishful eyes, and a mischievous grin, an idea ignited within her. What if she dared to bring back the passion she once had for baking? Helen had spent hours in the kitchen as a young woman, crafting cakes and pies that were not only culinary treats, but conduits of emotions, each recipe laden with stories waiting to be told. Could she rebuild that vibrant connection with her past through food once again? Determined, she returned to the kitchen, heart racing. The clutter around her felt comforting rather than suffocating. She pulled out a worn cookbook, its pages yellowed and frayed, filled with recipes from her youth. Among them was her chocolate chip cookie recipe, the one her mother had taught her to perfect. Baking had been more than a task. It was a ritual, a form of love made tangible through the simple act of combining ingredients. As she set to work, the familiar rhythm of measuring, pouring, and mixing allowed her anxieties to fade, replaced by concentration. The kitchen transformed into her sanctuary once more. Each stir held the potential to revive the essence of who she had once been. But with each cookie she formulated, another question bubbled beneath the surface. What would happen when they were gone, consumed like the fleeting nature of her memories? Helen wrestled with the fear of returning to solitude, her heart racing with excitement, but tinged with a deeper anxiety. Could she maintain this energy once the treats cooled? Would she allow herself to be vulnerable enough to share her creations with others outside her home? The first batch emerged golden and fragrant, sending tendrils of warmth into the air. As she lined them on a cooling rack, her heart swelled with both happiness and apprehension. Were these merely cookies, or could they represent a bridge back to her old self? Even as she attempted to relish the moment, an internal rift remained. Was she escaping or evolving? As much as she wanted to reclaim her identity, the pathway was littered with unresolved fears and hesitations. With her grandchildren's laughter echoing in the hall, a quiet clarity began to form. Perhaps this was not just a journey back, but a pathway forward, an opportunity to bridge the past and present as she ventured toward becoming the woman she had always aspired to be. Yet a larger question lingered like the scent of vanilla in the air. What would she do when confronted with her deepest fears? For only through facing them could she truly discover what new heights awaited her. As the warm aroma filled her home, Helen felt the stirring of change within, preparing to confront the shadows lurking just beyond her kitchen door. What revelations awaited her in the nexus of joy and vulnerability? She was ready to find out. Helen watched the cookies cool, their edges crisping as the rich scent permeated her home like a distant memory. It struck her that this process was more than a simple act of baking. It was a sacred ritual, a connection to her past, a whisper of who she used to be. As she leaned against the countertop, warmth radiating from the oven, an explosion of possibility bubbled inside her. What if this was the beginning? Could these tiny morsels of joy be her calling card, flinging open doors long shut, both within herself and in her broader world? Helen paused, contemplating the infinite paths that could unfurl before her. As a wave of inspiration surged, she envisioned not just sharing cookies with her grandchildren, but creating moments of connection and joy in an even larger context, community events, perhaps a baking circle or a neighborhood gathering. The thought ignited an unfamiliar excitement, yet it also threw her into turmoil. The echoes of her past failures loomed large. Was she truly ready to step beyond the walls of her kitchen? Would she risk the vulnerability that came with creating connections, or would it shatter her fragile resolve? The laughter from the living room artfully intermingled with her scattered thoughts. Her grandchildren's joy fueled her determination. If she fostered this new venture, it would not simply serve her. It could build bonds among neighbors, bridging gaps that had widened over the years. Yet lurking beneath this aspiration was an unsettling truth. She had spent much of her recent life in isolation, choosing comfort over connection. Brushing aside her anxiety, she pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she began typing a message to her close friend Charlie. Thinking of baking for a small gathering at my place next week. Maybe bring in some neighbors to share recipes? She hovered over the send button, a deep breath filling her lungs. Would they come? Would she embarrass herself with mistakes? But as she pressed send, Helen felt a subtle shift. The connections she had long evaded were suddenly tantalizingly within reach. The next day unfolded with the anticipation of a budding adventure. Helen organized her kitchen, gathering ingredients and tools, assigning each step a new sense of purpose. As she mixed batter and chopped fruits for pies, she couldn't ignore the worry clawing at her. What if the gathering didn't go as planned? As she grappled with this reality, she recognized an undeniable truth. Growth was rarely linear, often appearing as a jagged path strewn with uncertainty. With each passing hour, her courage began outpacing the trepidation. After sending out invitations to neighbors and friends, she constantly fought off the inner voice that questioned her motives. But deep within, a new recognition dawned. Failure was not the absence of success, but rather an inevitable chapter within the narrative of her growth. As the day of the gathering approached, doubts visited often. Echoes of her previous retreats whispered that she was merely chasing illusions. Still, she learned to counter them. She had seen how tiny victories ignited something long dormant within her. Baking had broken the chains of her complacency, compelling her to step bravely into the unknown. Finally, the evening arrived. The table was set, an array of her baked goods glimmered under the soft yellow lights. She felt like a performer awaiting her cue, heart pounding, hands slightly trembling. Would anyone show up? Would this be enough to rekindle her flames of connection? As the doorbell rang, Helen's heart raced. Glancing at the assortment of cookies lined like soldiers at attention, her apprehension momentarily lifted. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of possibility wrap around her. What awaited on the other side could turn the page in her life story, or simply close another chapter steeped in silence. With one final breath, she opened the door, preparing to embrace whatever destiny had in store. both the thrill of potential acceptance and the lurking fear of rejection. The moment had come to face her vulnerabilities. What awaited her in the world outside the kitchen? Would she find the connection she craved, or would the darkness of doubt recoil her once again? The door swung open slowly, revealing Charlie standing there, a warm smile lighting his face. Behind him, a handful of familiar neighbors peeked cautiously from the hallway. An unexpected rush of warmth enveloped Helen. She couldn't help but feel both elated and terrified at the sight of them. Each face brought with it a history, a story of their shared neighborhood, and an unspoken bond of years passed in quiet solitude. "Wow, Helen, this looks amazing!" Charlie exclaimed, stepping in and taking in the inviting aroma wafting through the air. As others filtered in, Helen felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. It was not just a gathering, it was an initiation into something new. The stakes felt elevated, as if each cookie represented a bridge she was trying to build. Yet, insecurities nipped at her heels. Could she really sustain this connection? With every chatter of voices, Helen's heart began to race. She formulated small talk in her mind, but the words tangled beneath the weight of her thoughts. Would they appreciate her baking? Would they talk to each other while ignoring her? Yet, as the clock ticked, something within her shifted. Once hesitant, she moved fluidly around her kitchen, pouring drinks and encouraging laughter. The atmosphere carried a lightness she hadn't anticipated. Each compliment on her cookies fueled her spirit, lightening the burden of doubt that had shadowed her for years. "Your mint chocolate chip cookies are incredible, Helen. You should open a bakery," one neighbor gushed, and for a moment, Helen allowed herself to breathe. Perhaps she wasn't stumbling into oblivion after all, but entering a realm where vulnerability fostered connection. As the evening unfolded, Helen's anxiety began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. She decided to share her story, how baking had become a source of solace for her, a way of reconciling with her life. With every word, she peeled away layers of her guarded past, revealing the woman she wished to be. The responses were genuine, inviting a deeper exchange. Her neighbors reciprocated stories of their own struggles and triumphs, extending beyond the realm of sugar and flour into the rich tapestry of their lives. Helen felt the interweaving of shared experiences, something she had long sought but feared would remain just out of reach. The more they spoke candidly about their lives, the more empowered she became. Each revelation was like another cookie, adding sweetness to their emerging connections. But as the conversation flowed, a nagging thought began to echo, a challenge she had yet to confront. What if this newfound camaraderie was a fleeting moment, a transient high, disconnected from the reality of daily life? What if, once the last cookie had been eaten, everyone returned to their homes and the neighborhood reverted back to its previous silence? The evening reached its zenith when Helen invited everyone to join her in baking a few simple recipes together. It was spontaneous, albeit nervously so. Each neighbor readily accepted, a glow of enthusiasm sparking their faces. It was a leap, but she recognized it as a crucial next step, a direct confrontation with her fear of rejection. Now, as they gathered around her kitchen, rolling dough and forming shapes, Helen's heart swelled with gratitude. This simple act of baking became a catalyst for potential futures, possibilities stretching far beyond the warm embrace of her kitchen. Yet the night was beginning to wear on, and as laughter and camaraderie filled the room, Helen's mind wandered back to the life beyond these walls. What would life be if she ventured into other aspects of this connection? What if she expanded it beyond her kitchen, beyond baking? The thought both thrilled and terrified her, a tightrope between ambition and vulnerability. As the clock chimed, signaling the close of their gathering, Helen stood at a crossroads. Was she ready to fully embrace this shift in her life? The lesson from tonight echoed within her. Connection was nourished by vulnerability, and fear was only a shadow she could overcome. The moment was reaching a climax, one that would define her path forward. With her heart racing and mind swirling, she felt the pull of possibility. If she could dance through fear within these walls, what else could she unravel beyond them? Helen resolved to explore this new terrain. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, a step out from the comfort of baking into the complexities of building relationships, each one a cookie to create, a bond to nurture. But first, before she stepped into that uncertain territory, she needed to gather her courage for what lay ahead. What transformation awaited her on the horizon of her life? Would she fully embrace her journey, or let the shadows of doubt linger as her only companion? As dawn broke, a soft light streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the flour-dusted counters and scattered measuring cups. Helen stood there, a stillness in her heart as she considered her plans for the day. The previous night's gathering replayed in her mind like a cherished melody. Each laugh, each shared story, cultivated a warmth that lingered, but with it came the pressing weight of next steps. What now? For Helen, the kitchen had always been a refuge, a space where she could measure and mix with precision, creating treats that delighted the senses. But last night had introduced a new dimension, a sense of purpose that pulled her beyond mere baking. Could she truly extend that warmth and connection into her daily life? Taking a deep breath, she poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the rustic wooden table, letting her thoughts drift toward the possibilities that lay ahead. Her heart raced as she imagined hosting more gatherings, perhaps even themed evenings, focusing on different flavors or cultural dishes. Yet fear flickered at the edges of her mind. What if they didn't come? What if her vulnerability invited judgment rather than connection? Slamming her cup down, Helen felt a surge of defiance. This would not become another instance of retreat, another missed opportunity. The hesitation of the past crowed angrily within her, but she refused to silence her evolving identity, the one eager to explore her potential beyond self-imposed confines. She quickly scribbled a plan, considering what she might do next. She would invite different neighbors over, extending her reaches. Perhaps a taco night? A potluck? With each suggestion she envisioned, she felt the anxiety ebb. This was not just an event, it was a social experiment, a chance to intertwine her life more fully with those around her. But there was something deeper stirring, a thought that lingered like the aroma of freshly baked cookies. Helen recognized that opening her home invited not just her neighbors, but also her vulnerabilities. What if they discovered the cracks in her confidence? This line of thinking nudged at old wounds and past experiences that left her raw and exposed. Gripping the edges of the table, she pushed through that anxiety, wanting to get to know her neighbors beyond just their shared evening. She would ask them about their families, their histories, and challenge herself to do the same. This yearning for connection wasn't merely an evening of baking. It was a leap toward a life fully lived, rich with intertwined stories. Stepping into her role as a community member meant more than cooking. It meant becoming a listener, an active participant, someone willing to reach out and share her own struggles. Helen knew that meaningful relationships required effort, and as daunting as the task loomed, the thought of remaining isolated terrified her more. Fueled by resolve, Helen started organizing her thoughts and drafting invitations. She felt a flicker of excitement bloom amidst the apprehension. Perhaps they would reject her. Perhaps they wouldn't respond at all. Or maybe, just maybe, they would see the offer as a lifeline, their own likely battles laid bare as they arrived at her door. But she couldn't wade through uncertainty forever. Empowered by last night's shared stories, she prepared herself for a new chapter. Yes, rejection was possible, but so was success. As she began copying the invitations to distribute, the sounds of the morning street buzzed around her, a comforting reminder that her world had expanded. Each letter on the page felt like a step toward shaping her identity. Helen, baker, nurturer, and, perhaps someday, friend. With each invitation she distributed, Helen's heart began to race, mixing anticipation with fear. Today marked the start of her journey toward interconnectivity. Would she uncover more of herself in this process? Would her neighbors embrace their shared humanity? Outside, the world buzzed with energy, a reflection of her own inner landscape. Tomorrow would bring more than just a gathering. It would bring the promise of transformation from mere acquaintance to connection. As she sealed the last envelope, the doorbell rang. Helen's heart quickened. Who could it be? Was it a neighbor ready to embrace the vulnerability of sharing their life? Or a moment that would shake her courage, setting her resolve on an unexpected course? The uncertainty continued to surge within her, beckoning her toward either affirmation or confrontation. Taking a deep breath, Helen opened the door, welcoming whatever lay on the other side. Helen's breath caught in her throat as the door swung open. Standing before her was Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow from 2 doors down. She held a colorful bouquet of flowers, an unexpected gift that radiated warmth and intention. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Thompson chirped, her smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. "I thought these might brighten your day. I saw your invitations and wanted to thank you for the lovely idea." Helen's anxiety shifted. A warmth filled her chest. She gestured for Mrs. Thompson to enter, her mind racing. This was that first connection she longed for, and in this moment, the door bore more significance than she realized. It marked a transition, an embrace of possibility that sent a thrilling rush through her. "Would you like a cup of coffee?" Helen asked, unable to hide her enthusiasm. "Oh, I shouldn't really, but if you insist." Mrs. Thompson laughed lightly as she crossed the threshold. The kitchen buzzed with activity as Helen brewed the coffee. She watched Mrs. Thompson take in the freshly baked goods cooling on the counter, a mixture of cupcakes and cookies, each bearing Helen's signature touches. She felt her confidence swell as she imagined the joy her creations would bring. As they settled at the table, Helen could feel the weight of her nerves prompting her to make small talk, to keep the atmosphere light. But deep down, a voice urged her to dig deeper. "How do you feel about gatherings? I just sent out invitations for some themed nights," she ventured, her curiosity overcoming her hesitation. Mrs. Thompson lit up at the mention. "Oh, I love them. They make the world feel a little less lonely. You never know who you'll meet or what story will be told." Helen nodded, her heart racing at the implications of that statement. Being less lonely, it resonated. Wasn't that the essence of her desires? To weave herself into a tapestry of shared experiences? "What about you, Mrs. Thompson? Do you have any stories to share?" Helen leaned forward, a hint of eagerness creeping into her voice. The older woman's expression shifted, the amusement giving way to a glimmer of nostalgia. "I remember my husband and I hosting potlucks in our front yard. We'd invite neighbors, and every diverse dish told a story, one of joy, of struggle, of a life well lived." She paused, her fingers brushing over the petals of the bouquet. "But I haven't felt that warmth since he passed." A pang of empathy struck Helen, amplifying her own fears of vulnerability. Could her gatherings, still in their infancy, revive that warmth? Could they bridge gaps forged by loss? "I'm truly sorry," Helen whispered, a part of her aching to cross a threshold of connection she had month after month avoided. "I hope to create that atmosphere again. I want to hear more stories, more lives." A flicker of gratitude crossed Mrs. Thompson's features. "Oh, dear girl, you're already on your way. Sometimes you just need a small push. Just like in baking, sometimes it takes a pinch of salt to bring out the sweetness." Helen wrinkled her brow, pondering the metaphor. In her life, what would that pinch of salt require? Was it boldness with a dash of honesty? What if I were to bake something special for our gathering? Something that means a lot to me, Helen mused, unfurling the emotion she hadn't anticipated embracing. Sharing a dessert with those who gathered felt like an act of openness, an embodiment of shared vulnerability. Mrs. Thompson smiled knowingly. "That sounds delightful. You can tell them a story behind it, share its significance." As the morning flowed into conversations rich with laughter and poignant unfinished thoughts, Helen's apprehension, together with her dream to reach out, solidified into a burgeoning reality of potential connection. She realized that even her past scars could contribute to the flavor of her offerings. They might even serve as the salt that made her gatherings enriching. When Mrs. Thompson finally stood to leave, Helen felt a void threatening to establish itself, a sudden pressing knowledge that their conversation formed a tiny seed, one that needed nurturing. "Will you come back?" Helen asked. "To the gathering?" "Of course, dear," Mrs. Thompson replied warmly, her confirmation filling Helen with hope. After the door closed behind her, Helen leaned against it, heart racing with revelation. Was this, then, the first step? Creating space for not just herself, but others to share their burdens and joys? The thought invigorated her. However, doubt crept in as she thought again about her fears of rejection. This was no straightforward path. As Helen busied herself in the kitchen, mixing and measuring with renewed intention, she questioned whether she possessed the strength to be a consistent source of comfort and connection. The next day would bring the gathering. She could feel the commitment echo in her thoughts. What if they didn't connect? What if her attempts fell flat, leading her back toward isolation? But as the aromas filled her kitchen, Helen realized perhaps it was the act of reaching out, the willingness to bare her soul, that would prove transformative. Each cookie, each cupcake, a testament to her journey. The doorbell rang unexpectedly once more, interrupting her hesitant resolution. Each chime squeezed the air from her lungs, sending a perplexing mix of excitement and dread coursing through her. Was it another neighbor prepared to embark on this unexpected journey toward connection? Or was it yet another moment poised to challenge her resolve? Taking a deep breath, Helen opened the door wide, ready to meet whatever awaited her on the threshold. Helen blinked in surprise as the door swung open fully, revealing a tall figure overshadowed by unexpected confidence. It was Gregory, a neighbor she had exchanged pleasantries with briefly, but had never truly engaged. He was known for his own culinary passions, often experimenting with flavors that tantalized the community potlucks. Today, he wore an apron, flour dust on his jeans, and a basket of farm-fresh vegetables swinging at his side. "Hey, Helen, I saw your invitation on the community board and couldn't resist stopping by. I thought maybe I could bring something for your gathering tonight," he said, his blue eyes flashing a smile that eased her immediate anxiety. "Wow, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Gregory." She stepped aside, her heart racing. This unanticipated visit was both a thrill and a challenge, a melding of intentions surrounding her first gathering that now felt distinctly real. As he entered, she was acutely aware of her heart pounding with potential, yet simultaneously echoing her recent fears. There was no time to backtrack. She needed to engage, to seize what felt like an opportunity rather than a deterrent. "What do you like to cook?" she asked, trying to channel her earlier conversation with Mrs. Thompson, igniting the intimacy of shared stories. "I love cooking with seasonal produce. There's something poetic about aligning your meals with the seasons, don't you think?" he replied, selecting a ripe tomato from the basket. "I thought I'd whip up a rustic veggie tart. It's simple but meaningful, much like these gatherings should be." Helen nodded, intrigued. "That sounds fantastic. Culinary stories often resonate, much like the flavors they encompass. I see you understand the essence behind bringing people together." He set to work in her kitchen, and as the inviting aromas of fresh herbs and roasted vegetables filled the air, Helen observed the ease with which he moved. Each action was purposeful, revealing a natural talent that spoke volumes about his own journey. In his energy, she glimpsed the embodiment of connection, the act of sharing resources, skills, and moments of creation, inviting others to join the same narrative thread. As they worked side by side, she began opening up. "You know, I've been nervous about this gathering. It's a first for me, and sometimes I still wonder if I can truly connect with others. What if I'm still too shy?" Gregory looked up from chopping peppers, his expression turning serious. "That vulnerability you're afraid of? It's your strength. It's what draws people in. Everyone has their own brand of fear. The trick is to embrace it. You might surprise yourself." The sincerity of his statement ignited something within her, challenging her deeply rooted reservations. What if his belief in her held the key to surmounting her own self-imposed barriers? She felt a flicker of determination rise to the surface, eager to quiet the self-doubt that had lingered far too long. "Did you always enjoy cooking?" Helen asked, redirecting the focus back to him, hoping to unearth more stories. "Not always," he replied thoughtfully. "It started as a distraction, a therapy of sorts, during a tough time in my life. Cooking became a way for me to channel my emotions and create something beautiful out of chaos." Helen paused, absorbing the depth of his words. It echoed the challenges she herself faced. The world felt chaotic at times, and yet the act of cooking, of creating, possessed the potential to transform that chaos into warmth and connection. "I suppose every dish has a backstory, just like every person does," she said slowly, feeling her confidence start to weave into the fabric of their conversation. "Exactly," he affirmed, sprinkling herbs before placing the tart into the oven. "And that's what you're doing tonight. You're not just sharing food, you're inviting everyone to share their stories too." An exhilarating spiral of thought surged through her. This gathering, steeped in shared narratives and connections, could be a space for authenticity to flourish. And perhaps her own story could mesh with others to create an unexpected tapestry of solace and community. As they finished preparing the dish, Helen noticed the passing hours. There was little time left before the gathering opened its doors, the atmosphere buzzing with the potential for kinship. She felt the undercurrents of self-doubt still swirling, but saw them slowly evaporate, replaced with a burgeoning anticipation. "And what if nobody connects tonight?" she questioned, her voice barely above a whisper, the insecurity peeking back in. "Maybe that's just part of the process, Helen. However, you need to realize you're already offering something invaluable, your willingness to be open," Gregory responded, his words carrying the weight of truth. The reassurance he offered reshaped her internal landscape. She was not just a timid host holding on to uncertainty, she was a facilitator, poised to embrace stories waiting to be told. The doorbell rang again, and Helen jumped slightly, a jolt of excitement paired with nervousness coursing through her. She gripped the counter, realization dawning that regardless of the outcome, she had already taken a step into the unknown, a leap toward growth. With her heart pounding and a smile growing, Helen nodded toward the door, ready to meet her next visitor. Who else might be drawn into this evening, and what stories could illuminate the fabric of her gathering? The moment pressed on her, infused with both possibility and tension, a moment that could dictate the trajectory of her budding dream. As Helen opened the door, a rush of warm air and laughter spilled into the kitchen. There stood Miranda, a vibrant woman with an infectious energy. "I hope I'm not too early. I brought some sangria. Thought it could add a little sparkle to the gathering," she cheerfully declared, lifting her cooler bag with a flourish. Helen's breath caught for a moment. Miranda was one of those people everyone seemed to gravitate toward, a magnetic presence that made her own quiet demeanor feel all the more pronounced. That familiar wave of self-doubt whispered through her mind, but she remembered Gregory's words. She had to embrace these moments, even if they unnerved her. "No, not at all. I'm glad you're here. Come on in." She stepped back, allowing Miranda to enter, and immediately felt the atmosphere in the kitchen lift. As Miranda unloaded her ingredients, her enthusiasm became contagious. She expertly poured the sangria into glasses, explaining her simple yet delightful recipe as if it were one of the great culinary secrets. Helen watched, captivated, the way Miranda transformed ordinary moments into celebrations. Her spirit nourished not just the drinks, but the entire gathering. "Tell me more about your gathering idea," Miranda prompted, a twinkle in her eye. "What's the vision here?" Helen hesitated, scanning the room, anticipating judgment woven into the question, but she found herself responding openly. "Honestly, I want to create a space for connection. I think sharing food and stories can bridge gaps and create warmth among us." The statement flowed out more readily than expected, a blend of her intentions and the courage she was finding. As they stood together, Helen felt a new thread of confidence weaving through her, bolstered by the vibrant energy Miranda exuded. The act of preparing the evening with Gregory, paired with Miranda's buoyancy, transformed the nervousness she initially felt into a sense of purpose. "I love that," Miranda exclaimed, her voice energetic. "We need more of those spaces, especially ones that welcome everyone, you know?" "Yes. I mean, that's the hope," Helen stammered. But the affirmation buoyed her. Perhaps she had misjudged the power of sharing both her fears and ambitions with others. "And what about you?" she ventured. "How did you find yourself in hospitality?" It was her attempt to draw principles of connection from Miranda's experience, and it surprisingly opened up a door between them. Miranda smiled wistfully. "I think you find yourself in hospitality when you need it the most. I struggled with isolation, and throwing dinner parties became my therapy. The more people around the table, the less alone I felt." Helen nodded, absorbing the relatability of that experience. Together they were sculpting a narrative of resilience, finding strength in vulnerability. The act of opening her home was emerging into something not just personal, but universal. A connection that threaded through both of their histories. Yet, Helen couldn't shake her insecurities entirely. A twinge of apprehension flickered inside her, overshadowing the growing excitement. Her dinner gathering, it wasn't just a culinary experiment. It was a chance to prove to herself that she could overcome the fear of being unworthy, of being uninteresting. "Tonight," Helen began cautiously, "what if I still falter? What if we can't connect after all this?" Her voice wavered, revealing her trepidation. Miranda set down the pitcher of sangria and met her gaze directly. "You are already connecting, Helen. That's the beauty of it. This isn't just about food, it's about heart. Even if it feels shaky, that willingness to create space matters. It will resonate with everyone." Helen felt the gravity of Miranda's words like an anchor. Each added voice, each whispered fear or story released, would blend into a collective experience. Her struggles, her aspirations, becoming a shared tapestry woven of authentic humanity. Soon the doorbell rang again. The sound was almost a summons, an invitation to welcome another layer of connection into her life. This was no longer about entertaining. It was about forging genuine relationships. Miranda flitted around the kitchen, ready to greet the next arrival with that same contagious energy. "Let's do this," she said, lifting her glass in a small toast. Helen joined her, yet the pulse of her emotions surged erratically. She realized the evening held unspoken tension. The potential for connection sat alongside the looming question of whether she was ready to embrace it. Each new visitor was another piece added to her mosaic, and each interaction potentially a mirror reflecting her deeper fears, her growing resolve, her latent strengths. As the door opened for the third time, Helen couldn't help but wonder if this gathering would transform her in ways she wasn't prepared for. This could be more than just a dinner. It might unravel more complexities, pushing her even further toward self-discovery. What awaited them on the other side of that door? Would it be someone with a similar journey, or perhaps someone whose presence would challenge her even further? Each knock held the potential for revelation, a chance to confront her own hesitations head-on. As the door swung open, Helen found herself welcoming across the threshold not just a neighbor, but a dear friend from years past, Catherine. She exuded familiar warmth, radiating a gentle energy that immediately eased the tension in Helen's chest. In her hand, she carried a platter of freshly baked pastries, their sweet aroma mingling delightfully with the sangria and savory notes from the kitchen. "Catherine, I'm so glad you're here," Helen exclaimed, pulling her into a warm embrace. The comfort of the gesture bridged the months of separation that had crept in between their lives. "I wouldn't miss this for the world. I heard about your gathering, and I had to bring a little something special to share," Catherine replied, her eyes dancing with enthusiasm. "I've missed our talks and cooking sessions together." The familiar cadence of their past interactions ignited something deep within Helen, a connection she had long yearned for but hesitated to reach out for during times of solitude. Perhaps this evening wasn't just about food, it was a recalibration of bonds, long-standing, of laughter echoing in spaces previously vacant. "Come, help me set everything up," Helen invited, moving aside to let her friend in. As they prepared, the chatter between them felt natural, like slipping back into a well-loved rhythm, and Helen couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was her moment, a testament to the spirit of connection she had desperately sought. As more guests poured in, bringing their own stories and dishes to share, Helen felt a surge of energy course through her. Each person added a unique flavor to the evening, infusing the atmosphere with warmth and laughter. The kitchen became alive with voices intertwined, non-linear narratives emerging, each story sewn together through time and experience. "What's been your journey to get here?" Gregory asked Catherine as they congregated around the counter, hands busy assembling appetizers. "I know Helen has been focusing on rekindling connections." "We all need that sometimes, don't we?" Catherine replied, her gaze shifting to Helen. "Finding those threads of community feels even more essential as life drifts on. I had to remind myself how vital connections are in my own life. Too much isolation only breeds doubt and fear." Helen nodded, recognizing the depths of truth in Catherine's words. After years of retreating into the background, she had rediscovered the vibrancy that companionship offered. The chance to forge deep connections was a flicker she now wanted to nurture. The guests filled the living room, drawn in by the aroma of baked goods and the ambiance of shared warmth. As the evening wore on, Helen curiously observed the thread of alignment among different conversations. Laughter punctuated personal stories, revealing vulnerabilities she realized she shared with her neighbors. Individuals dished out their triumphs and challenges, vulnerabilities and joys, each moment resonating deeply as if the very act of sharing was a salve for their individual fears. Sitting cumulatively with the other guests, Helen shared the backstory behind her grandmother's stew. She recounted how food had always been a vessel of love passed through generations, a thread connecting family despite the distances. The vulnerability of her memories broke down barriers, and she sensed that those around her were let into a space of mutual exchange and understanding. Finally, as the evening began winding down, an unexpected moment arose. Helen stood, cradling the remnants of her grandmother's stew as a centerpiece for reflection. The room fell quiet and attentive, each set of eyes upon her. "I came here tonight not just to share food, but to share who I am," she began, her voice steady despite the whirlwind emotions. "I've spent too many nights feeling disconnected, and it's time to weave us into a stronger tapestry. Here's my promise. Let's continue these gatherings, share our journeys, and foster this community together." Whispers of encouragement filled the air, lighting the room with newfound determination. The words hung heavily for Helen, a commitment palpable enough to penetrate the cracks of their individual loneliness. They were no longer mere neighbors. They were becoming a community intertwined through their shared experiences, uplifted by a willingness to engage deeply with one another. Before the night closed, Catherine raised her glass in celebration. To connection, to stories, and to new beginnings. Everyone joined her, the chorus reaffirming Helen's direction towards intertwined, rich connections. As she looked around at the faces filled with warmth, nestled in laughter and camaraderie, Helen recognized a powerful truth. She had conquered the barriers that once limited her. The seeds of connection she planted that evening began to grow in a fertile ground of authenticity and shared stories. In this moment, she achieved not just a goal of hosting a gathering, it was a profound transformation sparked by the earnestness of vulnerability. Helen felt the weight of past anxieties dissipate, replaced by an exhilarating charge illuminating endless possibilities. As the last guest departed, Helen stood by the door with a heart full of gratitude. This time, the door felt more than just an exit. It was an entryway into a newfound life brimming with connection and community. No longer a silent witness in her life, she had stepped into the role of a catalyst, embracing vulnerability and connection, one gathering at a time. Now, with renewed spirit and solid confidence, she was ready to write the next chapter of her life, one steeped in collaboration, authenticity, and the warmth of companionship. So what awaits her next? Will she continue to manage these budding connections? Will she foster other dimensions of her community involvement? Helen couldn't wait to discover where this path would lead. This was just the beginning of her story, ready to unfold brilliantly as she continued to embrace every challenge and triumph ahead. And now, if you felt the spark of inspiration from Helen's transformation, you need to subscribe to the channel immediately. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and share these life-changing moments with even more people. Comment with your reactions and theories about how connection can transform lives. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of vulnerability and community.